I'm Paul Tyler. I'm a fiddle teacher here at the Old Town School of Folk Music. Been teaching here for nearly a quarter century, been working here for a little bit longer than that. I'm originally from a small town in Indiana. I was born in 1950 and grew up in the town of Hoagland, Indiana, which is where I developed my lifelong desire to be a fiddle player. And it wasn't because I heard the fiddle growing up, it was because I didn't hear it, because it should have been there. I grew up in a community that we loved to square dance. Anytime there was a wedding, anytime there was a benefit for the volunteer fire department or what have you, there was a square dance involved. But none of the square dance bands used fiddles because fiddles were kind of, at that point, seen as old-fashioned and people wanted to be modern. So they used electric guitars and accordions and saxophones and stuff, but no fiddles. And I knew that the fiddle should be there. So I wanted to find it. And later on, when I got out of college, I decided I'd learn how to play. I got a hold of a fiddle and started teaching myself and became completely awful at it. And so I gave it up. And then some things happened and I got inspired to start trying to play again, and I was asked to be a judge at a fiddle contest in the county seat in my hometown. And this was back during the bicentennial celebration of the United States. There was a lot of local history interest, and so for some reason in this area they decided they needed a fiddle contest, and they knew through various relationships, they knew that I had an interest and I had actually been to some, so I was asked to be a judge. And I went and judged this fiddle contest and wrote down the names of all the fiddle players and then started to go visit them. I no longer lived there, but whenever I came back, I'd go visit them. One of my favorites was the guy who lived just 8 miles away from where I grew up. And I wouldn't say he taught me, but I hung out with him and recorded his playing and learned tunes and played along with him. And the first time I got to play my fiddle at a square dance was at a family wedding anniversary party, a golden wedding anniversary party, and his band was playing. By this time, fiddles were coming back into use, and his band was playing, and he called me up to the stage, and he gave me his fiddle and said, "I want to dance, you play." And I was hadn't played very much at that point, but I did it, and I've never looked back. I've been playing for a long time, at least over 35 years, going on 40. More if we count my awful attempt where I failed when I was about 21 years old. So I got a chance to really learn the fiddle by hanging out with what I thought of as old guys. I'm now older than some of them were when I thought of them as old guys, but that was in various parts of Indiana and also up in Michigan and eventually in Illinois. So I visited a lot of fiddle players, recorded a lot of tunes, was involved in a number of projects documenting fiddle music in the Midwest. So I'm also a folklorist besides being a fiddle player. They all grew out of the same urge back from when I was a kid. The man I told you about who lived real close to me, his name was Francis Giels. He died just recently. And I had some of his stuff posted on the internet and on a website I run. And his family, he has a large family. He had 19 kids, and they're scattered. Grandkids and great-grandkids are scattered all over. They found his stuff on the internet and got in touch with me. And so I've been making copies for them and corresponding, and it's an interesting connection of things that happen after all these years. Another man like that who I really spent a great deal of time with. I ended up in southern Indiana at Indiana University and went to graduate school there. And while I was there for about 8 years, I hooked up with a man named Dickey from south of Bloomington down in Paoli. He was an incredible human being, probably the most important influence in my life beyond my parents. And I did a lot of music with him. He was a songwriter as well, but he and I really had a thing going with all the fiddle tunes that he had learned. He was born in 1911, about directly in between the birth years of my two parents, and so he took me back to a time when they were young, and he started playing when he was 8, and he could, at some point in the 1980s when he and I were playing for school kids, we were sitting in a teacher's lounge in a school in Indianapolis, and he said, "I woke up this morning with a tune in my head I haven't thought of in 60 years." And he played it for me, and I said, "Oh, that's a cool tune, Lotus. Where'd you get that?" He said, "Oh, I came from one of my neighbors. I can't remember which one." And so we went back after our performances and went back to my house. He always came up and stayed at my house in Bloomington. And for the next 4 or 5 months, we pull out a tape recorder and sit down, and he'd start remembering. It was like the floodgates in his memory opened up, and all these 60-year-old tunes he hadn't played were coming back. And so I learned a lot of those, and recorded him playing it, and I actually have put out recently a CD of some of Lotus's tunes, of him playing it. I'm one of the backup musicians. But if you'd like, I'll play you one of those tunes. That's one of those he found in his head one day after a long absence. In fact, he found that, the story goes, he was playing for a wedding of some friends who got married, and the community I lived with in Bloomington, whenever there was a wedding, we square danced. A little, very much like what I grew up with, only it was a little more informal and a little more hippie-oriented than my home community. But still, Lotus came up and he played for a friend's wedding. I was out of town, I missed it, but when I came back, he told me the story. He said, I started to play a tune, and I said, "Let's play Sweet Bundy." And I started in on it, Lotus said, and we played the tune, and when it was over, they said, "That wasn't Sweet Bundy." And I said, "Well, yes, it was, but it wasn't." And it was this other tune that he discovered, and he didn't have a name for it. So someone else heard it and has dubbed the name of that tune Dickey's Discovery, after him, Lotus Dickey. And it's become a fairly well-known tune, rescued from obscurity, and lots of people now play that tune. I also met another man who was born in Illinois. I met him in California. He moved out there in the late 40s, but we met him out there, and he was real interested in what we played, because we play a lot of Midwestern tunes. And he was from Wayne County, Illinois, and his dad had been a fiddle player. He was in his 80s when we met him, and his name was Mel Durham, and surprisingly, he played that tune. It was the only other person we'd ever heard to that point that played that tune, and he said his dad had played it and called it the King's Lament, which is really a strange name for a fast hoedown tune like that, but so, but I call it Dickey's Discovery.